Good evening. This is May 25th, 2021. It is the 1-year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd, which was recorded on social media. A man being murdered over a 9-minute, 29-second period. But my comments tonight will not be about George Floyd particularly, but about much of the sentiment which has arisen since his murder. There is in our country now a great deal of hate crimes being committed against Asian Americans, and now again against Jewish Americans. The mistreatment of Asian Americans having to do with the pandemic that has seized the United States and the world over the past year and 2 months or so. The hatred being expressed toward Jews is arising out of the ongoing difficulties in the Middle East between the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip and the nation of Israel. Last weekend in New York City, a Jewish man in his 20s was savagely beaten by a group of younger men. He survived, but was injured in the attack. During the attack, one of those responsible uttered the phrase, "Hitler was right." The purpose of this video is to express to any who see this video that Hitler was not right. Hitler was very, very wrong. I'll dwell on that a bit more. But know this: Hitler, having been defeated by the Allied forces, retreated to a bunker and took his own life. A cowardly exit for a man ultimately responsible for all of the deaths in World War II, which amounted to 35 million, and the absolute extermination of 6 million of the Jewish faith. And the extermination of the Jews was only part of the horror, because they were forced into labor, they were starved, they were separated from their families, and when the camps were liberated, many of them were literally walking skeletons. Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was the commander of the Allied forces, who liberated or was in charge of liberating the concentration camps, said this in his diary: "The same day, April 12th, 1945, I saw my first horror camp. It was near the town of Gotha. I have never felt able to describe my emotional reactions when I first came face to face with indisputable evidence of Nazi brutality and ruthless disregard of every shred of decency. Up to that time, I had known about it only generally and through secondary sources. I am certain, however, that I have never at any other time experienced an equal sense of shock. I visited every nook and cranny of the camp because I felt it my duty to be in a position from then on to testify at first hand about these things in case there ever grew up at home the belief or assumption that the stories of Nazi brutality were just propaganda. Some members of the visiting party were unable to um, go through the ordeal. I not only did so, but as soon as I returned to Patton's headquarters that evening, I sent communications to both Washington and London urging the two governments to send instantly to Germany a random group of newspaper editors and representative groups from the national legislatures. I felt that the evidence should be immediately placed before the American and British publics in a fashion that would leave no room for cynical doubt. Further, he wrote in his diary, of all these displaced persons, the Jews were in the most deplorable condition. For years, they had been beaten, starved, and tortured. And in Eisenhower speaking on April 25th, 1945, to the members of Congress and journalists who had been shown Buchenwald the day before. You saw only one camp yesterday. There are many others. Your responsibilities, I believe, extend into a great field, and informing the people at home of things like these atrocities is one of them. Nothing is covered up. We have nothing to conceal. The barbarous treatment these people received in German concentration camps is almost unbelievable. I want you to see it for yourself and be spokesman for the United States. Let's go back to something that he said in the earlier statement. I visited every nook and cranny of the camp because I felt it my duty to be in a position from then on to testify at first hand about these things in case there ever grew up at home in the United States of America, which was his home, the belief or assumption that the stories of Nazi brutality were just propaganda. During the insurrection of January 6, 2021, as the insurrectionists stormed the Capitol, as they videotaped themselves and as the media videotaped them, one of the insurrectionists wore a t-shirt, a black t-shirt with white lettering, which read Camp Auschwitz. Auschwitz, perhaps the worst of all the German concentration camps. My fellow citizens of the United States of America, who, like me, are blessed to live in a free land with freedom of speech and freedom of the right to assemble, as long as we do it peaceably, the right to protest, as long as we do it peaceably. But there are those in this country today who would deny the Holocaust, or who would usher in anew the mistreatment of others, Asians, Jews, African Americans, Latin Americans. I suppose that in a free land, ultimately, there will be those sentiments arising. But we cannot survive as a democracy if we allow these sentiments to foster and to flourish. I was raised, as I have said in other videos, in the great heartland of this country. I grew up with wonderful people, hardworking people, people who provided for their families, who loved their families. They were religious. They were irreligious. They were Republicans. They were Democrats. They cared little about politics one way or the other. But this nation, built upon the principle that all men are created equal, still strives to live up to that creed. I plead with you, all of you, my fellow citizens of the United States, hatred. Report it if you see it. Extend a hand of fellowship to any or all who are not like you. We are, in every sense, a great land. And we are a great land because we are a free land. And I intend to raise my voice in defense of our freedom, but to cast a dissenting vote against those who would shout as they beat another person, Hitler was right. Let me repeat, Hitler was not right. Hitler was wrong. History has proven it so. Let us not ever return or allow anyone to return to a time when those atrocities could flourish before our eyes or beneath our feet, as it were. I like to be as uplifting and as positive as I can be in these videos. But this outbreak of hate crimes versus Asian Americans and hate crimes versus Jewish Americans and violent insurrection against the government of the United States of America cannot be tolerated. Again, I plead with you, my fellow citizens, let us join together. Let us care for one another, and let us stamp out before it grows any worse feelings of hatred and a desire to mistreat those who are not like us. In a few days, it will be Memorial Day, when we pause and honor those fallen among us who died to keep us free. May we continue on the legacy of freedom that this country has stood for since its founding in 1776, or since its Declaration of Independence in 1776. I bid to you all a good evening.